Let's start with the invocation prayer. Om Agyanam Timmirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Urmilidam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansachanuram Mardanam Devaki Param Anandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Guru. Good evening and welcome back to yet another session on this lovely series. Last week we started on this journey on Gyan Yoga, and today we're going to finish this section. But let us have a quick recap so that we are all on the same page. Transcendental knowledge is knowledge about the soul, knowledge about the Lord, and knowledge about the connection between the two. It is not mundane knowledge. It is knowledge that transcends time, transcends space, transcends demographics, transcends ideology, beliefs. It is just transcendental because it has to do with something eternal. And this knowledge was passed down from the Lord, down to the Sun God, down to Viswasan, Ikvasu, and he is telling it to Krishna for two reasons. The first reason is that Arjuna was Krishna's friend and a devotee. So these were the qualifications that Arjuna had to have for Krishna to pass this parampara-based knowledge sent down by successive discipline. But that knowledge was broken. The chain was broken. And he has come back to tell it to Arjuna. Arjuna was surprised. How could you have told it to the sun god more than 1.5 million years ago? How is that possible? And Lord Krishna told Arjuna, you and I have taken many births. You have forgotten them, but I remember. Because I appear in my original transcendental form. I'm unborn, I'm eternal. And therefore, I can remember everything, but you can't. I come to destroy the miscreants, to save the pious, and to establish Dharma. Millennium after millennium, I appear. Then Lord Krishna explained that whole of society has been set up by him for the sole purpose of ensuring prescribed duties are undertaken. To make sure that there is both spiritual order and social order. Social order means everybody undertakes his or her prescribed duty based on the nature, based on the work they do, so that they can do their part and contribute towards the benefit of society. The Brahmanas, because they are very righteous, they have virtuous qualities, they like to learn, they are able to teach others so that everyone else is aware of the ultimate purpose of life. But the Brahmanas need protection. So we have the Kshatriyas, who are administrators. They are strong, they are powerful, they are valiant, they are able to protect society, and everybody needs protection. So you see, the social order is the Brahmanas, the learned intellectuals, who have basically the nature of goodness, share knowledge to the Kshatriyas, who are very passionate and have some goodness in them. But then business, life, economy has to go on. So we have another class of people called the Vaishyavas, who are very good at ensuring economic prosperity, to ensure there's food, there's livelihood, there's business, there's economy. And the Vaishyavas provide that basic necessities to sustain life, to the Kshatriyas, to the Brahmanas, and even to the Shudras. They have a nature of passion and some ignorance. The Shudras also play a very important part. They're not intelligent, they are not strong, they are not business-minded, but they serve everyone else. They provide the basic service that is needed for society to function. So every person has a prescribed duty, if undertaken properly, maintains the social order. When there's a breakdown in social order, then everything goes haywire. You see wars going on today because there's breakdown in social order. You see poverty, there's breakdown in social order. You see capitalism, there's breakdown in social order. So social order was meant to keep people, society in a state of balance. Then there is this issue of spiritual order. How does people grow throughout the various stages of life? How do they build the spiritual capabilities? So there were different stations in life, brahmachari, then the stage where a person learns about life and about spirituality and restraint from any sensual desires. Then there is grihastha, where people have families, raise families for continuity of human life. Then there is vanaprastha, and then finally there is sannyas, where people retire and go back. So these were orders that were set up. Now today, we're going to talk a little bit taken from this part to what is called the science of action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about action or work. What is the science of work? And what is meant by seeing inaction in action and action in inaction? Sounds a little bit confusing, but when I go through it, I'll explain that and also explain how is it people are able to actually work in accordance with prescribed duties as a form of sacrifice. And finally, what are the benefits? All right, so let's move on, and then I will slowly wrap up the topic here. So let us see first, when we talk about seeing action in inaction, we are referring to a situation where how knowledge is acquired through action and through sacrifice. Here, we are really trying to understand karma on the path of jnana. We will talk of the fact that intricacies of karma are very difficult to understand. And why is it difficult to understand? We'll discuss. And then the seeing in action, which brings the symptoms of a detached worker. So this is where we covered last week. We talked about spiritual order and social order. And when the spiritual and social orders are in place, these are the prescribed duties. So work has to be done in accordance with prescribed duties to follow the Varna, Ashrama, Dharma. Now let's look very carefully. When we talk about work, what does that mean? Work is something you do that will lead to reaction. But is it the action that leads to reaction? No, it is the intentions. It's very important to understand that. So if I'm doing something and my intention is to hurt somebody, obviously I'll get a reaction. But if my intention is not to hurt somebody, but I hurt somebody, then there is no reaction. You know, sometimes you're walking in a garden and you step on maybe a snail and you killed it. You had no intention. So in that sense, as long as the intentions are good, intentions are positive, intentions are not meant to hurt or create problems, this is okay. So the point here is the intentions or the consciousness is what is important that leads to the reactions. So that is one thing that we have to understand. So Lord Krishna says, do the work, but do not focus on the results. The intention should be just to do the work. Now, these reactions that we are talking about have to be understood in the context of reactions that could be positive. Why is it positive? Because if you do prescribed duties, which means you are doing what you're supposed to do, the reactions are positive. But sometimes we don't follow prescribed duties. We engage in sin. And this kind of actions that we do can lead to very negative reactions. This is called karma. So karma, which is doing prescribed duties, has a positive reaction. Karma, not following prescribed duties, going against scriptures, not in accordance to regulations, is karma. Now there is one more type of situation or work is called karma. Means no karma. That means neutral. So today we're going to talk about specifically what is the difference between these three and how does this actually add a better understanding on the concept of science of work. Okay, so let's first recognize that these two actually are what we are all doing all the time in the material world. We either do good or do bad, do good or do bad, do good or do bad. This one is very interesting. Let's first recognize the difference by definition. Karma is activity as per scriptural directions. That means it's pious. Karma, against scriptural directions, sinful. Very simple. It's either for or against. If it's for, it's pious. If it's against, it's sinful. Karma is activities for which one does not suffer any reaction. So that means you're doing something, there is no positive reaction, there is no negative reaction. It's like neutral gear in a car. You press accelerator, neither go forward nor backward. If the gear is if it's in drive, you press, it goes forward. Reverse, you press backward. This is neutral. Now, why is this even something that is necessary? Why is it being discussed? Why did Lord Krishna explain this to Arjuna? Well, the reason is this. In life, we either do activities that are against scriptures, which is karma. And if we do these kind of activities, according to Vedas, we will land up in our next life in what is called lower planets, hellish conditions, where we will suffer. But if we engage in pious activities, do the prescribed duties, karma, we'll end up in higher planets. We go up to heavenly planets, heavenly abodes. But when we go there, once our pious activity credit balance is finished, just like in the bank, your money is finished, then you have no money. Then what happens? You come back to earth. So in any case, whether you engage in karma or karma, you're always stuck within this cycle of birth and death, within material existence. So that is the issue with karma and karma. You're always stuck within the cycle of birth and death. But when you engage in karma, you will go towards Goloka Vrindavan, where Lord Krishna himself resides, and there is no coming back to the material world. So that is the fundamental difference between karma, karma, and akarma. And that is why Lord Krishna told Arjuna to do the work, but don't think about the results. Do it for me. You will not incur any sin because there is no reaction. So a lovely verse in text 18 is this. Karmani akarmaya paset. The word karmani means in action. Akarma, inaction. So doing something, not doing anything. Akarmani, in inaction, also karma, fruitive action. Yukta, a person who understands this is in a state of transcendental position. Krishna karma karat means although engaged in all activities. Translation, one who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men. And he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Let's understand this a little bit deeper. What is, in this context, in action? The word action means working for divine purpose, doing something as per scriptures, being his instrument, working for him. That is action. There is inaction, means no karmic reaction. So if we work for a divine purpose, just like Lord Krishna was told to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, because Lord Krishna asked him to, there will be no karmic reaction. If you remember in the class we had, one of the reasons Arjuna gave for not fighting was that he's going to suffer the consequence. So here, it's very interesting that this statement clarifies that as long as somebody works for divine purpose, there is no karmic reaction. In action, there is inaction. Now, if we talk about akarmani cha karma, in inaction, that means not undertaking prescribed duties, not doing anything, karmic reaction as a consequence of inaction occurs. Like for instance, a mother does not give food to a child, the child dies. Now, the mother is to bear the consequence of the child dying. If you're a teacher and you refuse to teach the students correctly, the two students fail, you have to bear the result of the students failing. Just like Arjuna said, I wanted to go and just renounce all actions. And Lord Krishna says, if you do that, then society will suffer because the other party will take over and ruin society, and you will be responsible. So it's important to understand here that the action we're referring to, undertaken for a divine purpose, does not have any reaction. And this is how one can liberate oneself from the bondage of the cycle of birth and death. Whereas inaction, not doing one's prescribed duties, actually has severe consequence. Are there any questions? Good. Let's move on. This is our karma. This is either vikarma or karma. Okay, now that we got this clear, let's talk about attaining jnana through yajna. Yajna means sacrifice. There are different types of sacrifice, and we must understand what is the purpose of sacrifice. Now, before we go into the different types of sacrifice and yajna, let us be very clear about this word, sacrifice. Sacrifice is very interesting concept because it is the only concept where you give and gain. Normally, you know, when you give something, you lose, right? If I give you $10, I don't have $10. I give you my car, I don't have a car. I give, I lose. Here, you give, and by giving, you gain. And what are you sacrificing? In the context of our normal material world, we say, oh, I sacrifice going to a movie, having fun with my friends by studying. Why? Because I want to gain something in future. I sacrifice some simple pleasures so that in future I have a better life. That's in the material context. I don't want to enjoy today so that I enjoy later. We understand that, right? But in the transcendental, in the spiritual sense, we are talking about sacrificing the lower self, the demonic tendencies we have to gain the higher divine qualities within ourselves. So it's very interesting. When you talk about giving and gaining, what is of lower value which we engage in, which leads to this duality of mind and troubling of your mind and the tendency for the enemies of the mind to emerge, give it up. To gain what? To gain peace of mind, to gain stability, so that we extinguish the enemies of the mind and be calm and peaceful. So that's what you give up. You give up what is of lower value to gain what is higher value. Now, what is meant by lower self and higher self? That's something that we have to be very careful to understand. Lower self means a state of consciousness that is conditioned by the urge to satisfy senses. That's the lower self. We talked about lust. We talked about tendency to enjoy and think that we are the owners and gratify our senses as much as we can. That is a conditioning where the consciousness is moving outward for self-pleasure. And that can lead to craving and lustful desires, which ultimately binds people in karmic reaction. So what is higher self? Higher self is the other way around. It's a state of consciousness that is conditioned by disentanglement with material objects. This is detached disengagement, which again we talked about in chapter 2. Very interesting. What we covered in chapter 2 is really reinforced in this chapter. So all the chapters are integrated. There is a very nice continuity. So to summarize, the purpose of sacrifice is to raise the consciousness from the lower level to higher level in order we give away what is of low value to gain what is high value. Okay? Are there any questions? All right.
Yeah, brother, can I ask a question?
Yes,
Sorry.
please.
The thing is, the lower self, sacrifice, you're referring to lower self to gain the higher self. Okay, that is probably one part of it. How about their sacrifice? Actually, sacrifice, like I read in one book, it said sacrifice actually has pain. Because a lot of people, when they do selfless service and all that, there is actually pain. There are certain situations where you have pain, And you see, like Jesus, he know there is a lot of what you call a lot of danger, and yet he moved forward, to help people with love. So he sacrificed. In the end, he had to sacrifice himself, right? So doesn't mean it could be lower self. It could be also means selfless services.
True.
For the good of man.
Very true. Jesus is the Son of God, and he is a higher level than any one of us ever can be. So Jesus did it for mankind. For that, we are eternally grateful. Here, Lord Krishna is talking to mortal souls like us who are way below, and he's telling us how to reach back to the Lord. And thank you for the wonderful example. Jesus Christ did the great sacrifice for all of humanity. And this topic is referring to knowledge, what kind of knowledge we need to reach out to that level. Thank you very much for that comment. Really appreciate it. Okay. All right. So we are going to talk about in the Bhagavad Gita, there are a number of verses talking about sacrifice. Talk about some yogis worship demigods offering different sacrifice in the fire of Supreme Brahman. Some are talking about hearing process, control mind. Some talk about functions of the sense and vital force, eightfold mysticism, stopping the movement, outgoing. It's a bit confusing if you look at it so many different ways. I'm going to help you to understand this better by breaking out in step-by-step format, okay? So now I'm going to share with you the topical areas. What type of sacrifice we're referring to? We're talking about sacrifice here in sometimes called Dravya Yagna, sacrifice of material possessions. We have money, we have goods, we have food stuff, we have whatever. All these materials that we have, we sacrifice it. Who sacrifices these material possessions? These are people who are basically materialists. Materialists, they sacrifice worldly possessions because they are interested in material benefit worship, the demigods by various sacrifices according to Vedic rituals. They are called Bhav Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. So these people, they are basically very involved in material well-being. They want to try to sacrifice this material well-being so that they undertake karma to satisfy the different devas or the gods that exist. And in chapter 12, it says, desiring success in the material worlds, they get the results, like attaining heavenly planets quickly. So this is one type of sacrifice for people who are basically materialist, people who believe in matter and they want to get better and better acquisition of opulence, happiness, joys in heavenly planets. All right. So another type of people are the Brahman, Supreme Brahman. Now, what is the Supreme Brahman? A part from materialists, we have another group of people called impersonalists. They believe that God has no form, has no shape, it's just impersonal. So they believe that the impersonal feature of the absolute truth has to be worshipped. You see, the absolute truth has got a personal and impersonal feature. They worship the impersonal feature and regard the forms of demigods as temporary. So they sacrifice the individual self in the supreme fire to end their individual existence to merge into supreme. So to them, they believe that they are the Brahman. They sacrifice the Brahman into the fire of Brahman to achieve Brahman. So these are impersonalists who are trying to merge into Brahman by sacrificing whatever they think is temporary, is materialistic. It's quite different from materialists, you see. So these people believe in the impersonal Brahman. So what they're doing is they're trying to sacrifice the individual self. So we talked about the materialists and impersonalists. Now, in this fire, there is a concept of development of knowledge of the eternal servitorship of the Lord, which is actually Jnana Yoga, is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn all kinds of reactions to work. Now, we look at it carefully. To have a fire, you need fuel. And the fuel can be wood. And this wood becomes ashes in fire. So the fire that is burning because of the wood turns the wood into ashes. Similarly, karma will turn into no reactions in the fire of knowledge. Because it's karma that leads to acquiring knowledge, right? We have to do something to acquire knowledge. That karma that is fuel or wood is burnt up and there's no reactions if we engage in the fire of knowledge. So we see that actions and reactions, which are the basis, actually are burnt up in knowledge. Now, we're going to go a little bit deeper and look into this issue of sacrifice by way of analyzing it in the context of situations that we face. Now, what is happening? We normally see yagya going on, we see this person throwing something in the fire and offering some mantras. What actually is going on? What is he throwing in the fire? Why is he throw food stuff and stuff in the fire? Now, there is a significance to this. And I'm going to explain the significance now. What he is throwing is attachments. Why is he throwing the fire? What does the fire represent? I'm throwing fire. Attachment into what? You see, when we have attachments to doing things because we have a purpose to achieve. We want to be rich, we want to be careful, we want to be intelligent, whatever. That is a personal purpose. But when we throw in the fire, we're throwing it in what is called a divine purpose. We're doing it for the Lord. Our attachments is thrown into the divine purpose for purification. Now, it's interesting to think of fire. Why fire? Fire means you obliterate it altogether. Like, for instance, you're reading a book, you put a book aside. After some time, you can take the book again and read again. But if you burn the book, you never get a chance to read the book again. That's it. The book is gone. It's obliterated. Even a piece of paper, you can crumple it, you can tear it, you can bring it back. But if you burn it, it's gone. So here, attachments have to be burned, which means there is no more trace of getting it back. That is sacrifice. It's not a question of not doing for now and doing it again. So what we are talking about here is a chance, really, for us all to begin a new way of spiritualizing activities. How do we spiritualize our activities? You see, we are very attached to being lazy or being ignorant. For instance, you want to sleep and you're having a nice sleep and you're very attached to being in bed, nice warm bed. But you sacrifice that. You sacrifice sleeping till late in the morning because you are trying to remove the mode of passion and laziness to achieve the mode of goodness. How is that? You see, when you get up from your bed and you go and have a cold bath, you're doing it because there is a divine purpose, and that is saucham, cleanliness, trying to seek cleanliness. The very fact of bathing for the purpose of being clean is seeking saucham, cleanliness. So we sacrifice that sleep for the purpose of being clean for the Lord. Similarly, we talk about food. We sacrifice eating stuff that is not healthy, but eat good food, sattvic food, for the purpose of making sure that this body where the Lord resides is healthy and is not diseased, for his benefit. So if we start doing things to sacrifice what we are attached to and putting it in the fire so that it's burnt, then we become purified. Then you move from the lower self to the higher self. You get rid of your laziness, your ignorance, and you move towards a level that is higher. So some people, they're so used to doing certain things that they're so attached to the thing, they cannot get rid of it. So in this context, for our karma to occur, we have to sacrifice it into that divine purpose. There must be a divine purpose. If there's no divine purpose, you cannot sacrifice for nothing. You have to define what is the divine purpose for purification. All right. Okay, now this one, hearing process and the sense in the fire of control mind. What does that mean? You see, here we're talking about the hearing process and object of senses of sound. For example, we only hear the Lord's name. We only chant the Lord's name. We only hear prayers. We pray. Why? We want to hear into the fire of the control mind. You see, the mind has to be controlled. That's why we spoke in chapter 2, why it's so important to keep control of the mind. Once the mind is controlled, we offer that bhajans, that chanting, that reading of scriptures, we read it aloud, we read the mantras, and finally this leads to self-enlightenment. That is the end result. So here, the sacrifice of the senses, hearing, sense of sight, sense of taste. Why? In order to go into the control mind and make the mind more controlled in order for ultimately self-realization. Again, this is from lower self to higher self. This is done by brahmacharis who are sacrificing their youth for learning and for discovery of themselves, also done through sravanam. Sravanam means hearing the words of the Lord, through smaranam. Smaranam means remembering. So these are also forms of sacrifice. Okay. All right. Now, when we talk about functions of all senses and vital force, we are talking about all the senses have certain functions. We see, we hear, we taste. There's a function, there's a reason, there's a purpose. We sacrifice it into the fire, again for purification. So here we're talking about even the breath. There's a purpose for breath to keep alive, but we sacrifice the breath, all the senses, into the fire for us to land up in a purification state. So it's very interesting. The functions of all senses and breath means you're giving up your entire existence. And there is a name for this. It is called tapo yoga, sacrifice through austerities. So you live a life of a hermit, no food, no water, no enjoyment, and that is another form of sacrifice. Tapo yagya, that is eightfold mysticism. Of course, there is another form of sacrifice which is called pranayama. Pranayama means sacrifice of breath. Prana means breath. Yama means control, control of breath. And this is something that is done as indicated in verse 29. Stopping the movement of outgoing breath, incoming breath, outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. So we talked about different types of sacrifice. There's one more sacrifice called Jnana Yoga, a sacrifice by studying the Vedas to acquire transcendental knowledge. Now, when we study the Vedas, we are sacrificing mundane knowledge for transcendental knowledge. We are sacrificing our mind, our time, our effort, our focus in order to understand better what is the purpose of life. Who are we? Who is the Lord? What is our connection? And it is stated in text 33, the sacrifice of knowledge is greater than the sacrifice of material possessions, O son of Partha. After all, sacrifice of work culminates in. So this is sacrifice of material possessions, but sacrifice of knowledge is higher. It's better. It's recommended. So when we look at a gradual movement of sacrifice, we recognize that first and foremost, material sacrifice occurs. Without attainment of transcendental knowledge, the sacrifice we do remains at the material platform because there is no transcendental knowledge. We just sacrifice our things, sacrifice our stuff. That's material. Okay. Now, when we have transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices is more advanced as is sacrificed at the spiritual platform. So two people sacrifice. One person sacrifices possessions, the other sacrifices time, effort, energy to gain transcendental knowledge. The one that is sacrificing to gain transcendental knowledge is actually at a spiritual platform. And having attained the spiritual platform, one is able to transcend miseries associated with material nature. And then, being thus released from such miseries, one is able to engage in loving transcendental service to Supreme Lord. So you see how it works. We need to be in the spiritual platform. We need to then, after attain the spiritual platform, transcend miseries, and only after transcending miseries, it's possible to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme. So to summarize, parts of karma lead to bondage, as we indicated earlier. Karma, vikarma, there's bondage. But part of bhakti and jnana gives liberation. So we talked about how is knowledge acquired through action and sacrifice. We discussed number of types of sacrifice. We talked about action. We talked about karma, vikarma, akarma. Now we're going to talk about the method, result, and glories of attaining jnana. First, we talked about attaining jnana from a guru, role of faith, and results and glories of jnana. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively. It means submit to his request, submit to whatever he says. We'll never challenge what he says and render service unto him. The realized soul can impart knowledge unto you. So we normally say this prayer, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Shaksha, Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Guru Veda. The Guru is leading us to Brahma, the Guru is leading us to Vishnu, Guru is leading us to Maheshwara, because the Guru is realized, he has seen, he has witnessed the Parabrahma within. To this Guru, I pay my obeisance. So this means we have to go to the Guru to gain knowledge, to get that, to burn the actions and reactions. Just as a blazing fire turns fire to ashes, so does fire of knowledge burn to ashes, reactions, and material. So that's transcendental knowledge. What is it doing? It is looking at the reactions to material activities and turning it into ashes. So with transcendental knowledge, there is no more reactions. That is the message of that text. Look at this video, please. You see, the sorry, video is not working well. But the point is the fishes are going in the mouth of the whale and the whale just closes the mouth. Okay. So what this is indicating, what is indicating is doubting the scriptures that repeatedly reminds us of staying away from sense gratification. That is the cause of bondage of life and death. That's what we do. But when caught in the bondage of life and death, only misery is experienced, just like the fishes out of ignorance enter the mouth of whale and die as a result. So just like fishes going into the mouth of a whale when the mouth of a whale is open, we doubt the scriptures and we just do what we feel like doing. In the end, we suffer the miseries. So it's important to understand that the ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. For the doubting soul, there is neither happiness in this world nor in the next. Key word is agya. Agya is fools who have no knowledge in standard scriptures. Asradhana means without faith in revered scriptures, and samyasa means doubt. Now, please understand that here we're referring to ignorant. Ignorant are people who don't know. They have not been told, they are not aware, they're just walking around in darkness. We talk about faithless means they don't believe God exists. They're atheists. To them, they don't have the faith. And even when they're told about it, when people speak to them, they read, they begin to doubt. Is it true? Is it possible? Are you sure? So when they don't have the faith, the doubt exists. But what is faith? Is it feeling? Is it function of the brain? Is it unfounded belief with no supporting evidence or material proof? What is faith? In Sanskrit, the word is Shraddha. Shraddha is made up of two words, Srat and Dadati. Srat means truth. Dadati means reality. And Shraddha means that which leads to truth and reality. But we have a lot of doubts because we live in a material world made up of human beings, and there are, we call defects in human beings. Every human being has this defect. To commit mistakes is one defect. To become illusioned is another defect. Why do we commit mistakes and become illusioned? Because we have imperfect senses, because we have a propensity to cheat others. These are defects in human beings. So when we live in life with such people, we get cheated. And we cannot really make sense of what is right and what is wrong. And then the faith here we're referring to in a material world is actually what we call Laukika Shraddha, mundane faith. Now we're not talking about that faith. We're talking about Pramaritika Shraddha, transcendental faith. That's different. That's not the same as mundane faith. There are three ways to gain the truth. One is through direct perception. The other is through inference. One is hearing from person with knowledge. Now, the first two, direct perception and inference, as far as we are concerned, you're talking about transcendental faith, is very difficult because we have imperfect senses. We cannot see beyond a certain point. We cannot hear beyond a point. We cannot experience beyond the material realm. We don't have what it takes. We infer things that we can see, we can feel, we can sense. So using the direct perception and inference, we can never seek truth and reality. The only way is to sabda, hearing from a person with knowledge. That is why this knowledge is passed on through disciplic succession. That's the only way you get that knowledge. But to start it off, you must have faith. That's why all of you are listening. You have some faith, okay, something interesting. And with this faith that you have, the first step, you go into association with people who have that faith and who have the belief and who dedicate their lives to the Lord. And in the Vedic system, once the association takes place, you get initiation from a guru who is going to guide you to reach the Lord through devotional service. That means there is this increasing intensity of faith until the faith is nishta. Nishta means firm. Initially, it's very vague, very basic, but slowly, slowly, after the association, through initiation, guidance, with more and more devotion, it becomes stronger and stronger. All right? So, therefore, one who has renounced the fruits of action, whose doubts are destroyed by transcendental knowledge and is situated firmly in the self, is not bound by works or conqueror of riches. So basically, he says somebody renounces the results of action taken, either good or bad, not attached, renounce. But that's not enough. You also have to seek transcendental knowledge. Why? Because then the doubts are destroyed. They are destroyed by the knowledge, because knowledge burns all action and reaction. And doubt is actually things we have because there's darkness, there's uncertainty, there's confusion. We need the knowledge to destroy it. And that's what transcendental knowledge does. So basically, through transcendental knowledge, when you destroy the doubts, you're not bound by work done, you are in akarma state. But when we are affected by results of action taken, we are happy, we are sad, we are affected by it, then we are bound by work done. That is karma and vikarma. That's when we go through the cycle of birth and death. Unlike vikarma, where the cycle of birth and death is broken by the grace of the Lord. So there are clearly two scenarios. One, bound by work done because affected by results of action taken. The other, not bound by work done because engaged in akarma. Any questions? Okay, this
Yes, one question, probably two questions.
Yes.
I think you talk about direct perception is very difficult, but from my experience, we have seen people they got direct experience and develop faith in their God, especially when they go through sufferings. Right? I have friends like actually who's a guru. He was a Christian, but his life was saved by Kuan Yin. So now he opened Kuan Yin's temple. We have seen like Christian also many people like they have a lot of faith in Jesus or in God because they went through suffering and they felt the God have helped them. I mean, normally most of the cases where they have this direct perception is normally from suffering. I do not know whether you agree to it or not.
Well, again, I like to highlight that this is primarily meant for people like you and me, So we are talking about people who cannot perceive things beyond material realm. Spiritual and material are two different things. Spiritual is completely beyond material. You cannot see beyond certain, even in material, you cannot see beyond a certain space. You cannot see atoms, but you got to trust they are atoms. You cannot see the sun at night, but the sun is still there. You cannot. So there are many things we cannot perceive because it's beyond us. But it's there. We know it's there, but we cannot see it. So we say perception means sense. Our senses is what's limiting it. So we're talking about senses that limits us because our senses are limited. Then we cannot say I can see because the senses are there. So in that context, the truth cannot be realized by perception. Now, when you suffer, that's fine. That's a different thing altogether. But what you're perceiving is something that is beyond what we're referring to in the context of perception. So that could be more an emotional, physical state. All right. So what we're saying here is to realize the truth, sabda is the fastest, the best, most safe, because it's coming from a person who is beyond the material realm, spiritual. So when somebody has already reached the spiritual state, is already beyond the three gunas, that person can share. But as long as you're within the three gunas, if you are blind, you cannot tell another blind person what to do. But a person who can see only can guide the person who is blind. That's the intent. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with what you say.
Thank you. All right. The next point is the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by weapon of knowledge. So that is the weapon. Knowledge, but that knowledge has to be sharpened with faith. Only then it can break the doubts. So the bigger the doubts, the more faith we need. Right? I like to give a simple example of this, which I think is very interesting. Look at this. You see the rocket taking off. Why is the rocket taking off? It's going in a particular direction. And that direction is already determined. That is the divine purpose. Well, the fuel that we need to push the rocket up is very, very significant, because without the fuel, the rocket cannot go up. That fuel is faith. Why do we need that faith? Why do we need the fuel? Because it has to go against gravity. And what is gravity? Gravity is doubt. Gravity is material desires. So as long as the doubts and material desires are there, these are gravitational pulls that hold us back. How do we release from this? Through faith. Just like a tree, you know, look at this tree. The tree is very strong because the roots are strong. It takes in the water. From the water, it goes up, and then it gives it to the leaves and allows fruits to come about. That roots connects the tree with the ground to absorb water. That is the connection. And from the connection, it cultivates a lot of water going up to give it to the leaves and the fruits so that they can be of contribution to animals and to living entities. So you see, there's connection, and cultivation is very, very strong for contribution to take place. So wind blows, the leaves may fall, but the tree stands because of connection. That connection, in our context, we are talking is the transcendental knowledge. Connection has to be strong. The transcendental knowledge has to be strong for us to cultivate detached engagement and devotional practice. Why do we have to cultivate detached engagement and devotional practice? Because we have to contribute to society and self-realization. And that is really what Lord Krishna meant by what he's referring to when he said, do your prescribed duties to society, through social order, to self-realization based on the spiritual order. And that is why he told Arjuna, do the work but get detached and engage in devotional practice on the strength of transcendental knowledge, because with transcendental knowledge, it will burn the doubts and all the reactions and actions. So you will be acting, but that acting will be divine. You will sacrifice all your lower self to go up into the higher self. That is why Jnana Yoga is a better form of sacrifice than all other sacrifices, because it takes you to the spiritual realm. So let us have a quick summary of the entire topic. Lord Krishna revealed the transcendental knowledge, and Krishna remembers all his past, what Arjuna forgets. And then Krishna does not, this karma does not apply to Krishna because he is the creator. He does not have ego, and Krishna's body is not material. Then he talks about his reasons for appearance: to deliver the pious, to annihilate the miscreants, to re-establish Dharma. That is the prime purpose, to satisfy the unalloyed devotees. Then Krishna reciprocates according to the degree of surrender. Everyone ultimately surrenders to Krishna, but how much he reciprocates depends on how much love or commitment there is towards him. And Krishna creates the Varna Ashrama system primarily to enable people to reach and connect back to him because of Dharma, because he wants to maintain Dharma. So he creates the system according to the modes of nature, and he's beyond the system because it is his prakriti, material, that controls the three modes of nature. It is not him, it is his doing. It's just like you didn't bake the cake, you just switched on the oven. The oven is the one that provided the heat to bake the cake. So this is an example of how Lord Krishna says, I did not create it. It is my energy that led to this coming about. Then Krishna explains the very intricacies of inaction and action, and how a man who is learned can differentiate between karma, vikarma, and akarma. And this kind of people are considered intelligent. And by doing work that does not have reactions, a person gradually burns his reactions and reaches back to God. Krishna describes different types of sacrifice recommended in the Vedas, which I've explained to you. There is Tapyo Yagna, there's Yana Yagna, there is also this Brahma Yagya. All these yagyas are done, but it is highlighted that the best type of yagya is Jnana Yagya because it takes you to the spiritual platform. So we started by talking about what is the whole context of Jnana, transcendental knowledge, and then we talked about how it is passed down, why is it done this way, and then we discuss action and sacrifice, how this has to be done to raise somebody from where they are to a higher level. And I think the moot point here is that if we realize that if we're serious in developing more divine qualities within ourselves, we have to be serious in burning the lower modes of our desires, which means that's the end of it. And if we keep doing that, we are building our karmas. And that we get liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So that ends this chapter. I know some of you have asked me for the PowerPoints. My problem is the PowerPoint size is very big. I cannot possibly load it on the chat box. What I'm suggesting is you give me your name and email address, keyed in the chat box. I will send it to your email, send you a link where you can download it into your emails, all right? So that way you can have everything. I just tried, but that's not possible. So if you can give me your email address, those of you who want it, don't want it, never mind, I won't send to you to trouble you. All right, okay. Any questions, anybody? Anybody likes to add some thoughts?
Yes, brother. Just want to know, because you are using the word transcendental knowledge. Does you mean, do you mean that it is the truth about life and God? That is transcendental knowledge, truth and God. Truth about life, truth about God. You are talking about that?
I'm talking about knowledge that transcends mundane knowledge. Mundane knowledge is knowledge in material world. Science, physics, maths, law, all that is mundane. That's materialistic. We're talking about knowledge beyond all this, transcends all this. That is knowledge about the soul, knowledge about the Lord, knowledge about connection between the soul and the Lord, and how we get back to Him. That transcends faith, transcends dogma, transcends age, transcends time. And that's what we're referring to, okay?
Okay, you're talking about transcendental knowledge.
Transcendental.
What I understand is transcendental knowledge and transcendental experience is two different levels, right? Of course, we need the knowledge to guide us to transcendent. And that transcendent only can achieve through sadhana. Whatever, it could be devotion, it could be meditation, it could be, the good thing that you do to reach that level. So, of course, knowing the transcendent knowledge is important.
Yes, that's right. Without knowledge, there is no understanding. Without understanding, there's emptiness. Knowledge is light, ignorance is darkness. The more candles you put, the more you can see better, the better you understand. So when we put very many candles, we see better, understanding gets better. So we're referring to that. Experience is a form of knowledge. When we experience, we learn and understand things better. All right, thank you. Any other questions, anybody? I want to thank you all for attending. I'm seeing the numbers are really increasing compared to last time. I'm sure some of you must have invited your friends. You're doing a great service to the Lord by calling your friends, by advising them to come. I also want to thank my friend who have given some very lovely, good questions. I really appreciate your questions, your involvement, your commitment is wonderful. Please do pass the word around. The more people who listen to this, the better it gets for everybody. We are being His instrument of the Lord, and the Lord, there's nothing that makes the Lord more pleased than to have His devotees sharing His glories. And by inviting others to come, and where they benefit, you benefit as well. So let's all work very hard to do this. Again, if those of you are around this area, if you have time, do visit the Geeta Ashram in Petaling Jaya. We have functions every Sunday, and it'd be nice if you come and see in person how these sessions are being conducted. For my part, I'm very thankful and grateful to you all for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you. Wish you all the best. I'll see you again next week. Jai Sri Krishna. Jai Gurudev.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take the email down, manual.